Welcome to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic. In this video, we are going to discuss the quintessential cards needed to build the core of a Defender Matters commander deck with Arcades the Strategist as its general. Arcades the Strategist debuted in Core Set 2019 and is a 3/5 Elder Dragon with Flying and Vigilance for 1 and Bant colors. Whenever a creature with Defender enters the battlefield under our control, we draw a card, and creatures we control with Defender assigned combat damage equal to their toughness rather than their power, and may attack as though they did not have Defender. Arcades serves all things Defender very well by providing this card drawing and combat ability, both of which will be the focal points in constructing the core of this build. Our goal is to inundate this brew with a slate of creatures with Defender, as well as including a suite of additional Defender synergies for the purposes of strengthening this theme. While we replenish our hand and simultaneously overrun the battlefield, we will out-tempo and out-resource our opponents on the path to imminent victory. We begin the core of this build with a slew of economically costed creatures with Defender that provide additional benefits. Both Wall of Blossoms and Wall of Omens are 2-mana 0/4s that draw us a card when they enter the battlefield. Carven Caryatid continues our card drawing fest, except its mana value is 3 instead of 2. Wall of Mulch's card draw comes in the form of an activated ability that allows us to pay a green mana and sacrifice a wall we control in order to draw a card. We can pay 2, tap Portcullis Vine, and sacrifice a creature with Defender in order to draw a card. Its activated ability is a bit pricier and slower, but it gets the job done of getting cards into our hand. Speaking of getting cards into our hand, Gatecreeper Vine puts a basic land or a gate card into our hand when it enters the battlefield under our control. Vine Trellis taps to add a green mana, while Sylvan Caryatid taps to add 1 mana of any color. Wall of Roots can add a green mana by placing a -0/-1 counter on it, which is an ability we can activate only once per turn. Its robust toughness of 5 provides a long-lasting source of free green mana. From a mana perspective, Overgrown Battlement can produce a lot more. It taps to add a green mana for each creature with Defender we control. Axebane Guardian does the same, but we add mana in any combination of colors instead. We scry 1 when Wall of Runes enters the battlefield, while Sunscape Familiar reduces the cost of our green and blue spells by 1. Perimeter Captain allows us to gain 2 life whenever a creature we control with Defender blocks. For the purposes of self-preservation and deterring our opponent's combat, let's include some defenders that may make our opponents think twice about attacking us. Whenever Wall of Frost blocks a creature, that creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. Wall of Tears returns its blocked creature to its owner's hand, while Wall of Junk is bounced back to our hand whenever it blocks, priming itself for another card-drawing enter-the-battlefield trigger through Arcades. Jeskai Barricade has Flash, and when it comes into play, we may return another target creature we control to our hand. This can save one of our blocking creatures from dying, while still receiving the benefits of its blocking abilities. We can pay a green mana and give Wall of Tanglecord reach until end of turn, which will allow it to block flying creatures that our opponents dare to send our way. Both Fogbank and Guard Gomazoa can block flying creatures as well, but all combat damage dealt to them is prevented. Our opponent's attempts to break through our defenses for combat damage may be futile. In the case of Fogbank, the damage it deals also is prevented, so let's net send it into combat. Wall of Glare can block any number of creatures each combat, a feat that is enhanced even further when enchanted by inviolability. Our opponents may not approve. As combat is one of our paths to victory, we should include some evasive combat options. Angelic Wall and Hover Barrier have flying. Wall of Denial flies as well, but it also has Shroud stapled onto its massive 0/8 body. Well, in our build, it's massive. Weathered Sentinel is a 2/5 with Defender, Vigilance, Reach, and Trample. As a bonus, Weathered Sentinels can attack players who attacked us during their last turn as though it didn't have Defender, and whenever it attacks, it gets +3/+3 and gains Indestructible until end of turn. So, a 5/8 with Vigilance, Trample, and Indestructible that can deal combat damage equal to its toughness when Arcades is on our side of the battlefield? Yes, yes, and yes, please. It doesn't have evasion, but Shield Sphere is a 0/6 with a mana value of 0. Whenever it blocks, we put a -0/-1 counter on it. We have plenty of other blocking options, but we do not have a creature that can deal at least 6 damage with a mana value of 0. Stalwart's Shield Bearers gives other creatures with Defender we control +0/+2. Remember, our creatures are going to deal damage equal to their toughness, so this is a fantastic toughness buffer for just 2 mana. Crashing Drawbridge can tap to give creatures we control haste until end of turn. Aside from our aforementioned creatures having Defender and very hardy toughnesses, of which Arcades wholeheartedly approves, there is another noticeable trend among these creatures. It is a tendency that has been given careful consideration for the purposes of including an additional win condition in this build without sacrificing the efficiency or effectiveness of our Defender theme. The trend? These creatures have mana values of 3 or less, which allows us to play with a copy of Allurin. With this enchantment on our side of the battlefield, any player may cast creature spells with mana value 3 or less without paying their mana costs and as though they had flash. Yes, this effect extends to each player at the table, but we will be more prepared to benefit from it than our opponents. With Arcades, as each one of these creatures comes into play, we draw a card, which provides opportunities to cycle through our deck and find, if we don't already have it, our copy of Cloudstone Curio. Whenever another non-artifact permanent enters the battlefield under our control, we may return another permanent we control that shares a card type with it to its owner's hand. With this Allurin and Cloudstone Curio synergy, we can cast a creature with flash through Allurin. When it enters the battlefield, we draw a card from Arcades. Cloudstone Curio returns another one of our creatures to our hand. We cast it through Allurin and repeat the card drawing and creature bouncing loop. We continue to cycle through our deck and find, if we don't already have it, our copy of Laboratory Maniac. If we insert Labman into this card drawing cycle as we near the last card of our library, then we win the game when we try to draw a card from our empty library. As the first 2 components of this game-winning combo synergize within the confines and scope of this build, adding one outside the theme card in Laboratory Maniac does not disrupt our flow and adds another way for us to claim victory over our opponents. This Allurin Cloudstone Labman engine is functional even if Arcades is indisposed and languishing in the command zone. Arcades' card drawing ability can be replaced by Guardian Project and or the Great Henge. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under our control, if it doesn't have the same name as a creature we control, and it won't, then Guardian Project puts a card into our hand. The Great Henge does the same without the restriction of same-named creatures. Either way, these cards are also functional within our theme and provide redundancy for our alternate win condition. We have a few more Defender-specific inclusions to discuss for the core of this build. Shield Wall Sentinel tutors for a creature with Defender when it enters the battlefield. When Wall of Stolen Identity comes into play, it does so as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except it's a wall in addition to its other types, and it has Defender. The creature that was copied becomes tapped and does not untap during its controller's untap step for as long as we control Wall of Stolen Identity. Remember, if the copied creature has any enter the battlefield triggers, they will trigger when Wall of Stolen Identity comes into play. Imagine the possibilities. Tree of Redemption can tap to exchange our life total with its toughness. When Wingmantle Chaplain enters the battlefield, it creates a 1/1 white bird creature token with flying for each creature with Defender we control. And whenever another creature with Defender comes into play under our control, we create another 1/1 white bird with flying. Imagine the number of bird creature tokens that could be created through our aforementioned Allurin and Cloudstone Curio combo. Our opponents will attempt to keep our Arcades off of the battlefield as much as possible. It won't matter. We have other ways to win with our Defender engine. High Alert is an enchantment that allows our creatures to deal combat damage equal to their toughness rather than their power, and it allows our creatures to attack as though they didn't have Defender. This completely mimics Arcades' second ability. We also can pay 2 in Azorius colors and untap target creature. Although it's an ability that we can activate only as a sorcery, Walking Bulwark can do the same to target creature with Defender by paying 2 mana. That creature also gains haste. As most of our creatures with Defender are walls, including a copy of Rolling Stones makes sense. This enchantment lets wall creatures attack as though they didn't have Defender. For more Arcades-like redundancy, Watley, the Sun's Heart, Rasad in Bashir, and Assault Formation allow our creatures to deal combat damage equal to their toughness rather than their power. Watley also has a life gain ability, while Rasad could double the toughness of each creature we control whenever he attacks, as long as we have the initiative. By paying a green mana, Assault Formation lets target creature with Defender attack this turn as though it did not have Defender. It also gives creatures we control +0/+1 until end of turn for each 2 and 1 green mana we pay. Since combat is our primary path to victory, let's enhance the efficiency and effectiveness of our attacks. Tetsuku Umizawa, Fugitive, makes creatures we control with power or toughness 1 or less unblockable. With Sidar Kondo of Jamura, creatures our opponents control without flying or reach can't block creatures we control with power 2 or less. By paying 3 and tapping Access Tunnel, target creature with power 3 or less can't be blocked this turn. These effects permit us to send our creatures into combat comfortably and watch our opponent's life totals tick southward. For more combat enhancement, Bar the Door and Tower Defense are instants that give creatures we control +0/+4 and +0/+5, respectively, and can be considered win conditions when paired with our aforementioned mass unblockable enablers. Speaking of win conditions, Towering Titan has the potential to one-shot an opponent. It enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is equal to the total toughness of other creatures we control. There's no chump blocking this giant either, because we can sacrifice a creature with Defender to give all creatures trample until end of turn. Even the Titan's mass trample enablement may be enough to overrun our opponents. Let's close out this video by adding a few more cards that synergize with and enhance our theme. Generally, in a building around video like this one, removal and disruption spells are left for each individual deck brewer. However, we would be remiss if we failed to mention some of these oh-so-synergistic cards. Creatures with power 3 or greater do not untap during their controller's untap steps with Meekstone and Marble Titan. These are effects that barely register on our side of the battlefield. Slaughter the Strong makes each player choose any number of creatures they control with power 4 or less, and then each player sacrifices all other creatures they control. Our side of the battlefield, once again, should remain relatively unharmed. Wave of Reckoning has each creature deal damage equal to its power to itself. None of our creatures will fall from this spell, while many of our opponent's creatures should. Retribution of the Meek destroys all creatures with power 4 or greater, and they can't be regenerated. This is another global effect that has very little impact on our side of the battlefield. Fell the Mighty destroys all creatures with power greater than target creature's power. More often than not, that target creature is one of ours, and that creature's power is 0. Solar Tide provides 2 options from which to choose. We either destroy all creatures with power 2 or less, or we destroy all creatures with power 3 or greater. More often than not, we will choose to destroy all creatures with power 3 or greater. Dusk Dawn is 2 cards in 1. we can cast Dusk to destroy all creatures with power 3 or greater. With its Aftermath ability, we can cast Dawn from our graveyard and return all creature cards with power 2 or less from our graveyard to our hand. For recursion straight to the battlefield, we include a copy of Ascend from Avernus. We return all creature and planeswalker cards with mana value of X or less from our graveyard to the battlefield, and then we exile Ascend from Avernus. At the beginning of combat on our turn, Sight of the Scale Lords gives creatures we control with toughness 4 or greater, +2/+2, and vigilance until end of turn. Unnatural Growth takes the power and toughness boosts up several notches. At the beginning of each combat, we double the power and toughness of each creature we control until end of turn. If paired alongside any of the mass evasion enablers showcased earlier in this video, then the game should end soon after. This video provided a blueprint for building the core of a Defender Matters commander deck around Arcades the Strategist as its general. Removal spells, disruption, ramp, and the land base can vary from build to build and also are dependent on metagame preferences and availability. The cards discussed during this video are suggested options for crafting the core of a Defender Matters EDH deck, in addition to providing ways to optimize this theme. Let me know your thoughts about these recommendations in the comment section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic.